Hi there, it's just me today. I thought I would come to you for a mundane astrology discussion of a chart of someone in the news. And the person I've been kind of curious about recently is our president, Joe Biden, and more particularly, kind of what's going on with his health. And because his health was, particularly in July, was in the news a lot. He was diagnosed with COVID not once, but twice, had to quarantine in the White House. He also um, gave a speech in which he said he'd had cancer because of pollution and kind of freaked everyone out. And it turned out that what he meant was he'd had some basal cell carcinomas removed a number of years ago, but no melanoma or anything of lasting seriousness. And so, anyway, what's going on in Joe Biden's chart? That we would be talking about his health. In fact, there was even an editorial in the New York Times that said, "How well is Kamala Harris being prepared to be president? You know, Joe Biden is pushing 80 and he's had COVID twice." But if we look at his chart, we see that it's not surprising that Joe Biden at 79 is not only able to run for president, but serve. His ascendant, Sagittarius, is ruled by Jupiter. And, you know, the ascendant is our body, the vehicle we carry around with us. And so the ruler of that ascendant is kind of like what guides our vehicle through life. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And so that gives him not only his warmth of personality and his charisma, but also a good constitution. A couple of things that we could quibble about would be that Jupiter is retrograde. Planets are most effective when they're direct and moving along quickly. But it was just recently retrograde when he was born. It's in what's called phasis, which means that it had station to go retrograde just 7.9 days before he was born. And so that gives that Jupiter some extra power. So in spite of its retrograde nature, it has a lot more power in his life than it would otherwise. It's also in his eighth house, which is in that quincunx aspect to his ascendant, which tells us, you know, he's an eighth house helmsman, ruler of a chart, would be someone more others oriented. And so he may overlook the needs of his body sometimes in order to serve his mission, do what he is kind of focused on doing for other people. We also, for health, look at the sixth house, which is kind of the care and maintenance and repair of the body, among its other topics. And so the sixth house, again, is in quincunx to that ascendant because it's not always convenient for us to deal with our health, right? And so it tends to derail us a bit. So things are put into the sixth house that take us off course. You know, you decide that you're going to take a cruise and then you come down with COVID, and it totally derails your plans. Well, you have to kind of go into your sixth house and deal with that. And so we've got Joe Biden, though, with his sixth house, has the moon in Taurus, which is another exalted planet in his chart. And so this tells me that his health care, he would have access to good health care, access to things that he would need to stay healthy, good food, exercise, possibly the support of people in his home to encourage him to be healthy. So that moon in Taurus is really nicely placed here in his chart, in spite of the fact that it's in quincunx, you know, to his ascendant. It just kind of is like, kind of, I'm over here, Joe, come take care of you know, whatever's going on. Put your other plans on hold. But we also, when we look at the sixth house, we want to see, you know, who's in charge of this house, who's the manager, and that's Venus. And when we look at his Venus, we see it's in detriment in Scorpio. It's in the 12th house where it's not as visible. It's in what's called aversion to the ascendant. And it's also under the beams of the sun, which, you know, Venus, when Joe Biden was born, was not shining in the sky because it was caught, it was not visible because it was near the sun and so the sun's light obscured it. And so all of these things would tell us that he might not always be putting his own needs first, that he's very focused on, you think about your mission, that sun, and would kind of put his own needs on the back burner. But one thing that really does help that Venus, it is in trine to that Venus in Cancer, his helmsman. And so while he may not always put his health needs front and center, he has recuperative powers. He has the ability to find the resources he needs to care for his body. And so this all played out very clearly in the health crisis Joe Biden experienced that we know of. The most serious one of his life was in 1988 when he had not one, but two brain aneurysms. And this is kind of what was going on February 1st. And we see that at that time, of course, very dramatically, Pluto is on his Mars. Mars rules ahead. Kind of hidden things coming up out of nowhere to attack kind of his brain. But also he said later about that time, I was traveling overseas and I had this horrible pain like I've never experienced before. But what did I do? I just got on a plane and went back to DC. And so, of course, later his doctors, once they realized what was going on, said, you could have died. That was a very risky decision to make. But that kind of reinforces this Venus saying, I've got things to do. I'm on this trip. I'm going to stay focused on that. Then I'll deal with this headache when I get back to home. And so that kind of plays out in his chart in 1988. But also, if you see what else is going on then, Mars and Uranus on February 1st, which is sometime before the aneurysm occurred, are in his first house. Uranus causing crisis to the body, Saturn restrictions, slowing you down, especially in Sagittarius. And then Mars is here. Mars is, the lesser malefic, but in his chart it'd be the greater malefic since he was born in the day. And so Mars likes to come stomp around and kick up dust. And so he's got all this stuff happening in February. But if you look to see by February 22nd, he, when I would assume he had returned to DC, been treated and had surgery to repair the aneurysms, what has happened? We see Mars, Uranus, and Saturn have all lined up at 0 degrees Cancer, moving away, taking stress off of his body. But what are they all doing at 0 degrees Capricorn but trining that moon? And so that kind of awakens the promise of his chart in that, remember I said, he would have very good resources for healthcare. He would have people who would be very good at taking care of him. And of course, he went to Walter Reed Army Hospital where, there's some of the best surgeons in the world, had wonderful care, survived his surgery. And so you can see how all of these kind of markers about health were playing out in Joe Biden's chart. But what about today? What was going on when he was diagnosed with COVID? Joe Biden himself, kind of going back to his natal chart, one thing that we know is that Uranus is moving through his 6th house, and that's a 7-year transit from 2018 to 2025. And so anyone with Uranus in their 6th house isn't going to have health crises, but it can indicate the potential is there for some instability. It could just mean something as simple as you go to your doctor, your cholesterol's high, you have to change your medication and your diet. Or that you find out that the type of exercise you're doing is really becoming too strenuous, so you switch to water aerobics. Or, so there's a lot of different things that could happen. You change doctors. In Joe Biden's case, we can probably figure that he's going to have some sort of changes to his health between 2018 and 2025. And so when he got his COVID diagnosis, it's kind of interesting. the North Node is also moving through his sixth house. And so you can see the North Node here had come to meet that Uranus. And so here's the potential in the chart. There could be some instability with health, but the North Node is coming there. It's like giving it a dose of steroids. And where the North Node is transiting in our chart is kind of where the tide is coming in, where we're finding that we need to give more attention. So between now and when the North Node leaves his sixth house in 2023, later on in 2023, he'll be dealing with probably a little more need to focus on his health. At the COVID diagnosis, now we have good old Mars here, which had entered his sixth house, again, where it likes to stomp around and kick up dust. And Mars loves to be in the sixth house. It loves crisis. It loves breaking things down. It just loves that kind of crisis management of the sixth house. And so all of these things lined up in here would tell us, he's going to have to take care of his health. And interestingly enough, the South Node, where the tide's going out, tells us that this could be a time that's a little discouraging for him. He's got this strong sense of mission. And then he's thinking, maybe I'm not realizing my ambitions and my dreams. I'm having to adjust my expectations. And also you think about the 12th house as being solitude, the things that we do to kind of nurture our soul. Just as the sixth house is kind of the repair of the body and maintenance and repair of the body, the 12th house you can think about as the maintenance and repair of the soul. So solitude, meditation. Joe Biden's a very religious man, participating in religious observations. So it could be right now, he's working very hard. He's got some health things to address, but maybe he's not getting the time he needs to really rest and recharge. And so it's kind of interesting that at this, the nodes meeting Uranus, he was kind of put into quarantine where he had to be by himself for a while. And so we can look for his health to be a topic probably as long as the North Node is in Taurus. And also we find that eclipses happen in Taurus and Scorpio. For example, astrologers were kind of blown away last November 19th when we had a lunar eclipse at 27 degrees of Taurus, which was exactly opposite his sun and Venus. And that's when he had to go under for a colonoscopy, and Kamala Harris was president for a few hours. And so that was kind of a time when his health kind of came into national prominence, but also that 12th house he had to withdraw. And so we're looking at another eclipse happening this fall, a solar eclipse in Scorpio and a lunar eclipse again in Taurus. I'm sorry, the lunar eclipse will be the lunar eclipse will be in Taurus. And unfortunately, that will be on November 8th, Election Day. So I am imagining that again will be a time of that kind of withdrawing and having to regroup. And especially since the midterm elections, once they're over, that's usually the beginning of the 2024 election, the next election cycle, when primaries are starting to get organized and people are starting to run. So I would imagine this is a time when he's looking at his health, Taurus, he's kind of withdrawn, he's kind of looking at the sort of big picture of his life, and he's going through, I would think, over the next 6 months, a decision whether he's going to run or not in 2024. Because remember that North Node is still in Taurus, making his health, just something he's got on the front burner. Even if he doesn't have any particular problems, just assessing, do I have the health to be president for 4 more years? And then that 12th house of kind of introspection and withdrawing and thinking, how many years do I have left? Do I want to spend them in the fishbowl as president of the United States? So I can see this is going to be a really serious time for him. Moving into 2023, then, we're going to see initially, you see Saturn right here is at 23 degrees of Aquarius. So that's going to be eventually crossing into his south node here at 29 degrees Aquarius and squaring his Venus and Sun. So as we get to the end of the year and into early 2023, that Saturn is going to emphasize the kind of seriousness of this time and really his looking at his body, what his body needs, what his body's capable of before he makes a decision about 2024. And then finally, I think by the final eclipse in May of 2023, he'll have made his decision. And let's see, I think, yeah, this is the eclipse of May 5th, 2023. And so at this point, he's going to have one thing that's changed in his chart. You can see Saturn, Taurus is still receiving the North Node and is about ready to go over his moon. So looking at his health and his needs is going to be paramount. But something else has happened. Throughout his presidency, Pluto has been in Capricorn, which is granted it's opposed his Jupiter as helmsman, but it's made a lovely sextile to his Sun and Venus. And so he's had that support that whatever demands he had on his time and his body, he was able to meet them. He was able to find the resources. But by 2023, Pluto slipped into Aquarius. And note that degree it's at 0 degrees Aquarius, squaring his moon. That's the exact point that Jupiter Saturn was at right before he assumed the presidency. So I think with Pluto making, when it enters a new sign, it's usually a pretty dramatic shift, especially in the whole sign like I use. It shifts not just into the sign, but into the topics of one's life. So this is his daily life. So this has kind of an energy of shutting things down in his daily life, that suddenly things are not the same as they were. Pluto, you think, kind of shuts something down and then opens up something else. So my best guess is he'll probably make the decision at that point not to run. And kind of what reinforces that is Pluto is not only kind of coming into this area of his life, which is his daily life, but it's squaring that moon. And so I think he's kind of saying, okay, the moon has certain needs. My body has certain needs that need to be met. And if I want to enjoy these last years of my life, maybe I would rather be with my family, doing things I love to do. And maybe it's time to let this journey go. So that's it. I like to predict things. That's just my guess that at this eclipse or around this eclipse in May of 2023, he'll be making this shift. And what I really love about this point in his life is that, remember that Saturn, when he became president, was entering Aquarius, his third house, his daily agenda, keeping him busy. It's now leaving. It's crossing that south node, which almost is a sense of like, I'm done. And it's going into his fourth house, which has kind of a coming home. It's in Pisces, which emphasizes rest, emphasizes just that kind of inner peace of kind of knowing that we're all one world and that we can all live together in harmony, very beautiful Piscean things. And with Saturn and Pisces, that he's got that need for that inner peace. And in his fourth house, he wants that kind of going home feeling. I'm with my family. I've done my job. I'm ready to rest. And Saturn in Pisces is only going to help him as it moves forward through the rest of his term, creating nice trines to this all of his Scorpio planets. And then in 2025, when he would be starting his life as a private citizen again, Saturn and Pisces together will be up here in the late degrees of Pisces. I'm sorry, Saturn and Neptune will be together in the late degrees of Pisces and creating, a grand trine in his chart of Saturn, Neptune to his helmsman, Jupiter, and to his sun and Venus. So I'm kind of looking at that as being a very peaceful time, a kind of taking off his shoes and saying, I'm home. So that's my look at Joe Biden and his chart or his health as we can see it in the astrology chart. So thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you next week. Bye.